Hey everyone, so to give you a bit of context for this video, a few weeks ago I was invited down by Lloyds Banking Group to deliver a presentation at their London headquarters. It was a great event, it was attended by people working within finance and banking, and we covered everything from sleep to training to nutrition and medical testing, looking at real practical and tangible ways of improving health and optimizing it across these different pillars. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the chat, but otherwise, enjoy the video.
And tell me if you resonate with this, but have you ever gone through a period of life where your energy dropped, your sleep was falling off, stress was building up, your body started to change, but you weren't quite sure where or what the problem was, and then you just weren't sure where to start? Can anyone resonate with that kind of feeling?
Every day.
Every day, right? Okay. Ongoing. Okay. Well, that's exactly what I'm here to speak about today, and I think that's why we're all here. I rarely meet anyone that doesn't care about their health. I'm sure I've met every person I've met has something to say about it. But what I do come across more often is people that are trying bits of everything. So it might be a new supplement. Oh, I'm going to start a new diet or start a new routine. Oh, there's a new wearable that's on the market. I might try that. But not knowing what matters most for them. We are inundated with health advice all the time. I'm sure you've come across podcasts, YouTube videos, things you see on social media telling you what to eat today, how to train, etc. We are inundated with it, but we're less sure on where we should actually start from. And that's basically why we're here today, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Now, a big part of why I started Legacy Health was actually losing my father in my early 20s. Seeing someone work incredibly hard the entire life, sacrifice their health, and then only seeing what happens only understanding what's happened a lot later down the line had a profound effect on how I understood health and how we should all understand health. And the question that arose to me was, how many people are out here building careers, and that's something we can all relate to, sacrificing our health for our families, supporting families, shouldering responsibilities, all the while things are moving in the wrong direction slowly underneath the surface. I'm sure that's something many people can relate to. And the eureka moment for me, or the one-liner insight, was that health often fails discreetly before it fails obviously. And that's what Legacy Health was built to address. What we created was a precision health advisory that helps professionals take a personalized and proactive approach to their health using biometrics, using diagnostics, and lifestyle interventions. Inside Legacy Health, we typically look at these areas when it comes to understanding an individual's health and assessing it. Starting off with DNA foundations, it's understanding how does one's unique DNA signature and genetics affect their biological tendencies? How does it affect personalization? When it comes to precision diagnostics, is how can we measure what's happening underneath, things that we can't necessarily feel or see? When it comes to sleep, it's how well is someone recovering? How well are they getting restorative sleep? When it comes to nutrition, it's about how well is someone fueling themselves? How well is someone regulating their energy? Physique is about your body composition, your strength, your capacity. And finally, supplementation sits last as a support to the plan rather than being a foundation. But today, what I'm going to do for everyone here is take you through a simplified process of that. So I'm going to be asking you many questions, and we're going to get quite personal. I hope that's okay. I'm going to be asking a few questions today. And I'm going to look at each area of the spectrum here, why it matters, and what you're currently missing out or what you should be paying attention to, and a sensible place to start. So again, like I said, if you were expecting a standard longevity talk or wellness talk today, sorry to disappoint you. Today is going to be very much hands-on and practical. So let's start off with the first area. What I'm going to get you to do is have a look at sleep. I'm going to present you a few statements on the board. Have a second to read through them and tell me what resonates best with you. And I'll be asking a few questions to get a better understanding of where you're at. So when it comes to sleep duration, across A to F, where does everyone see themselves? Does anyone see themselves as A? B, C? C?
B.
B, okay. Anyone lower than B? C, D? C, D. So 5 to 7 hours of sleep. Okay. Anyone less than that? E and F? Okay. So right now, does anyone have any kind of sleep routine? Is anyone tracking their sleep with any kind of wearable? Has anyone tried? Okay. Got one person in the lag. You've tried it? Well, what do you use currently?
It's not really that. It's Amazfit.
Amazfit.
Yeah.
Is that from Amazon? Or is that not? Is that a separate thing? And is that something you're currently using or something
Yeah.
you're using right now?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. What kind of...
I've had it a little while.
You've had it a little while. So what kind of insights are you typically getting from it?
A little while, but it's quite detailed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's accurate. It like breaks it down like REM sleep, deep
Yes. Okay.
clarity, in a way, and all sorts of stats.
That's great, because we're going to actually get into how that actually works. So by the end of it, you'll know how to use those stats for yourself. So when it comes to how you feel in the morning, can anyone relate to feeling refreshed and energized in the morning, or are people feeling groggy most days?
I feel fine.
Anyone else?
Sorry.
So are you feeling fresh and re-energized in the morning, or are you feeling quite groggy and feeling quite tired? Like when you're rolling out of bed, it's like
Something in between.
something in between? Okay. And in terms of sleep scheduling, how consistent would you say it is? Does everyone have a standard sleep and awake time, or?
Yes.
Yes.
I seem to wake up at about 5 a.m. without an alarm.
Is that when you're meant to get up, or do you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I fall asleep again.
You
And
fall,
then I'll wake up when the alarm goes off,
and that's quite frequent, is it?
and that's quite frequent.
Okay, but your sleep time is quite consistent, or is it?
No,
No.
it's inconsistent.
Does anyone else relate to that?
Yeah, and mine. Sorry.
Yeah, so I wake up at 5-ish.
5-ish?
Yeah.
And is that your typical wake time, or is it?
No.
Okay, we see a pattern here. Everyone's getting up at 5 o'clock. So Lloyd's Bank has got people waking up at 5 o'clock for some reason.
And then I go to sleep and put up my alarm off
Okay, you're hitting the snooze button.
and go, get up late.
Okay. And I can't assume you feel quite refreshed after that. It's more like a broken sleep. Okay, well, we're going to address them. And I'm assuming this is pretty much resonates. Frequent waking during the night. Everyone's experienced that to some extent. And I'm sure everyone understands the pitfalls of having bad sleep. But interestingly enough, just because someone may get 7.5 hours and another person might get the same 7.5 hours, both their sleeps can look quite different when it comes to breaking it down. So what I mean by that, one person can wake up after the 7.5 hours and feel like they're restored, rejuvenated, and refreshed. The other person who's had fragmented sleep throughout the night can feel absolutely horrible. So it's not necessarily about how many hours you've spent in bed, but what do those hours look like? So when we work with people, typically we use a Whoop band, so the thing I have on my wrist right now. And I can see how this might look intimidating at first. You've got all these numbers out here. But I'm going to break it down by, first of all, REM and deep sleep. Has anyone come across these terms before, REM and deep? Your one does. Has anyone else come across these terms? So during the night, you go through sleep cycles. Typically, people go through around 4 to 6 cycles a night. And each of these cycles are around 90 minutes in length. And each of those cycles, which are 90 minutes in length, they have different stages, sleep stages. So you have the wakefulness, then you have deep sleep, and then you have REM sleep. The first half of the night is more weighted towards deep sleep, and the second half is more weighted towards REM. Deep sleep is physically restorative sleep. So that's when your body's doing the deepest work in repairing muscle, rebalancing hormones, helping and protecting your immune system. So if you were to feel quite physically shattered the next morning, it's because you haven't had enough deep sleep. And that's largely the first part of the night. REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, that is when it comes to brain restorative functions, when it comes to memory consolidation, when it comes to emotional balance and regulation. That's largely largely REM sleep, and that happens more towards later end of the night or the early hours of the morning. So everyone experiences dreams, and they wake up first thing in the morning, that sort of thing. It's because that dreaming is happening more closer to that portion of the night. And typically, what you'd want to see is an even split of around 2 hours each between REM and deep. So if you're not getting enough deep sleep, like I said, you're feeling physically shattered in the morning. And it can affect things like your immune function as well. When it comes to REM, if you're feeling like you've got brain fog in the morning, your memory doesn't work as well, or you're just not emotionally there or balanced, that's because you haven't had enough REM sleep. And there are a few things we look at as well, apart from REM and deep sleep. We look at things like sleep consistency. Are you consistently sleeping at the same times every night? Because that regulates your circadian rhythm. If you were to go to bed at 10 p.m. one night, 12 another, 1 another, your body doesn't really have a set point to go off to have a stable rhythm. And that's why your sleep can appear fragmented. Typically with the men we've worked with, we see that they have 90 minutes to 2 hours of fragmented sleep during the night, and they're completely unaware of it. So they'll wake up the next morning completely battered and drained, but not know that. So when you use a wearable, at least to understand where your baseline is, you're able to find out, okay, I'm waking up during these points of the night, and it appears that I'm not getting enough deep or not enough REM sleep. When it comes to sleep disturbances, that's typically how many times you wake during the night. Up to 15 is considered normal, but any more than that, you know there's something wrong. It could be something like sleep apnea. It could be the fact that typically having a partner or a pet or a child in the same room can also affect that. Things like respiratory rate. So this is very prevalent during COVID, right? If you had a wearable or a Whoop during COVID outbreak, people would see a hike in their respiratory rate, their breathing rate throughout the night, 24 hours to 72 hours before they actually got ill. So this is very much a preventative kind of measure where you can see how your body trends over time and what that could mean. And again, the last thing I'm mentioning is time in bed. Ideally, you want to get, there's this ballpark of 6 to 8 hours. It could look different for individuals, but around that mark is typically what we're looking for. But again, like I said, what's happening in between is what's most important. So the question is asking yourself, are you feeling energized and rejuvenated in the morning? If not, then I'd start paying attention to these things. Are you relying on caffeine to get you through the day? These are the kind of questions we're looking at. And that was just one day. This would be the trend over a month. And this is something you could do yourselves. You could see, am I getting a rough, even split of REM and deep sleep every night? If one is much lower than the other, then we'll look at a few ways to combat this and mitigate that. And looking at things like sleep efficiency. Am I getting, for the time I'm in bed, how much am I actually sleeping during that time? So that's another thing that I would be paying attention to. But this isn't me saying you should be reliant on a wearable, but this is more so if you're in a bad state, this is how you should take the first step in optimizing that. So these are recovery metrics, and they are essentially also telling you how well your body's recovered after a night of sleep. So as you can see here, we've got a few metrics. We've got HRV and resting heart rate. Has anyone here heard of HRV? So HRV is your heart rate variability. So when it comes to the heart, everyone is aware that the heart beats, but it's not a consistent beat. There's actually a bit of variability between the beats. So there can be 0.8 seconds, 0.7 seconds, 0.6 seconds, 0.9 seconds between each beat. The reason I'm explaining this is because that variability is good. The higher the variability, the more recovered your body is. HRV is a good trend to look at to see how quick your body moves from a parasympathetic to a sympathetic state. So what does that mean? So the fight and flight effect, has everyone heard of that? Right, so it's how quick your body can go from flight to fight, essentially. And the easier for your body, the more flexible and malleable your body is to be able to switch between these two modes, the healthier you seem to be over time. And that's the trend we use HRV for. So the higher the HRV, the better. And that looks different for everyone. My baseline is around the 70s to 80s. For someone, it could be the 50s, 60s. For an athlete, maybe it might be in the hundreds. But the idea is, by looking at HRV, it's very easy to see if you're recovering well over time. Resting heart rate. So a lot of individuals will have who are maybe not in the best of health will have a higher heart rate in the 70s and 80s. When we work with clients, the idea is to get them to low as possible, ideally to the sub 50s. And that's just your body's capacity to deal with stress, but also it's just showing how healthy you are overall. So being able to detect your resting heart rate, I'd say, is very important over time for any individual. If you wanted to pay attention to one thing, things like resting heart rate are key. So in terms of making this happen for you, it's actually very simple. I know I showed you a bunch of metrics on the board, but to remedy and fix this, it's actually quite, it's pretty practical. Setting a consistent sleep and awake times. I understand life can get really busy, and it's okay if you don't hit absolute perfection. But the idea is that you want to have a clear window, and when you say it's non-negotiable that this is my bedtime window, and I'll do things to ensure that I'll get to that window, and that's when I get into bed. Another thing, exposing yourself to morning, I'd rather say daylight than sunlight, to anchor your circadian rhythm. So in the morning, what's the first thing that everyone does? Roughly, does anyone check their phone first thing in the morning? Does anyone go straight to the bathroom? Does anyone check the phone? Who put the hand up? Check the phone? Sometimes, right. So the idea is when you wake up, you have two hormones that are kind of working against each other. You've got cortisol and melatonin. So melatonin broadly is the sleepiness hormone. And you've got cortisol, which is the alertness, wakeful hormone. And cortisol peaks in the morning and it drops off during the day. And what it does is by keeping you alert and awake, that's when you feel alive and ready to conquer the day. And the best way to get it up is through morning daylight. Getting outside for at least 10 to 15 minutes and letting that light hit your eyes is very important to set your circadian rhythm in the right way possible. So that way your wakefulness is in the morning and your sleepiness comes on time throughout the evening. So that's something that's very key. You can anchoring yourself to at least a 15-minute habit of getting daylight into your eyes. Avoiding artificial bright light in the evening. Okay, that's nearly impossible nowadays because our lives are intertwined with technology, and that's just a symptom of the modern day. But the key here is if you can at least have an hour wind down where you don't have bright light, at least if the lights are dim, and even around your house, not having super bright lights everywhere, but having dimmer lights can make a huge difference. And especially just getting into bed. Ideally, you want to have a dim light setting around you and not have completely bright lights when you switch them on. Because I'm sure everyone's heard that blue light at nighttime can affect how alert and awake you are. I don't want to say it's overstated, but because we can't necessarily avoid it, but limiting it is something that's probably more tangible. And wind down with a pre-bed alarm set 1 hour before bed. So just like you'd schedule anything, at least this time would let you know, maybe this is the time I should start scheduling my wind down to get to sleep. So sleep environment. So is everyone aware about how the temperature affects your sleep? Has anyone heard of that? So you want to ideally keep your room a bit cooler because the cooler your room is, the easier it is for your body to get into deep sleep. And that's when you end up falling asleep quicker. Things like blackout curtains can help, something worth investing in if bright light hits your room and it affects your sleep. Minimal noise, ensuring things like your mattress and pillows as comfortable as possible, and again, removing electronics. I think we can all put our hands up and say we're guilty of that, but limiting it and instead using it, looking at a bedtime routine can actually work really well in your favor. So,
I have a question.
Go for it.
On the previous slide to this.
This one, okay.
Yeah. So number 2 says expose yourself to morning sunlight, but then on the flip side, you're suggesting use blackout curtains.
So blackout curtains can, yeah. So there's two things to that. When it comes to blackout curtains, it's not necessarily just about the morning light. So let's say you're waking up at 5 a.m., right? You don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. So ideally, when it comes to the morning sunlight, you want to avoid that. But also, if you've got a back garden and you've got neighbors who have lights on during the night, it can also affect that. So it's ideally having that having as dark as possible, even using a sleep mask, to ensure that you're asleep until you want to wake up. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
How do you do that in this country, especially October to March?
So, sorry, in terms of having blackout curtains?
For yourself, morning sunlight.
Right. So sunlight is ideal, but when we live in the UK, we can say goodbye to that.
This morning where it was really cloudy.
Daylight still, it's still daylight.
Is that better than waking up and sitting in your
Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. It's so understated because typically what we hear online is, oh, sunlight, 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 which is great if you're in America, but here when we're pretty much inundated by clouds, any kind of daylight's important. Because at the end of the day, the sun is still there, even though the cloud's still covering, the light's still there. So it's very important that your body recognizes that and you set yourself up that way. Anyone else?
Just on
Yeah.
3, like there's blue light filters,
There are.
night mode, there's blue light, the glasses, some people wear them.
Yeah. It appears to work for some people, but I think the utility of using those kind of glasses are overstated. I personally use this method of wind down where 3 hours before sleep, I stop consuming food, ideally. So I tell that by expression, you have food close to sleep. So the problem with that is if you're eating quite close to bed, your body's digesting that food. And in doing so, your body has an elevated temperature. So trying to get into sleep can be a bit more difficult. 2 hours before bed, I would stop consuming liquids because the need to wake up and then go to the bathroom, an hour, maybe half an hour, come off the electrical devices. Using something like getting a book puts me to sleep every time. Because it's not necessarily for you to learn anything, but reading and journaling, meditation, these kind of things can put you into a much more relaxed, calm state. And they're very easy things you can incorporate. So just overall, when it comes to sleep, is tracking your data at the beginning. I'd say if you recognize that any of those statements above earlier really affected you and realized, okay, maybe my sleep isn't that great, and it can really affect my propensity to develop long-term chronic disease in the long run, then I would spend a month tracking your sleep and keeping an eye on those metrics. And then doing those things I mentioned earlier, like finishing your food earlier, drinking further away from bedtime. Even things like I'm not going to say don't drink alcohol, but drinking alcohol close to bedtime can affect your REM sleep. So I'm sure many people can relate to having a drink one night and then waking up the next morning and not feeling that fresh and having that brain fog. It's because that alcohol cuts into your REM sleep. So whilst alcohol puts you to sleep, sedation is not the same as restoration. So that's one thing I'd keep in mind. And just things like exercising regularly, keeping your body in a state of activity so you're actually tired by the end of the day is really important too. And by doing these little things, you can easily improve your sleep over time. So now we're getting onto nutrition. So I want to understand, where would you see yourself when it comes to these statements? I'll give you about 10-15 seconds to read through them. Would anyone relate to the first one? I'll put the second one on. Okay, got B here. Anyone C? Is anyone? No? Yeah, okay. Well, okay, so let me get into this. When it comes to nutrition, I'm sure everyone's been told that there's this new diet that you should try because that's going to fix all your problems. Everyone's pretty much related to that at one point in life. There's no such thing as I want to get rid of this myth that there's no such thing as a perfect diet. How nutrition affects you depends on your sex, depends on your hormones, depends on your age, it depends on your lifestyle, your stress, and a multitude of other factors that we can't factor in to possibly create a perfect diet. For example, intermittent fasting. Has anyone come across that? So intermittent fasting might be great for one person and he might have good clarity and it reduces brain fog, but for a perimenopausal woman, that can actually affect hormones in a negative way. It can increase cortisol, increase stress. So there's no blanket prescription for what kind of diet is best. Before I get into this, so there's a few things when it comes to nutrition. It's understanding what do you want to get out of nutrition? Do you want to lose fat? Do you want to build muscle? Do you want to go through, are you trying to clear your gut health? Are you trying to fix brain fog? What is your lifestyle like? Are you a new mother? Are you an executive that's working 10-hour days and you have the stress of many meetings and people to deal with? Are you an athlete? All of these different archetypes require a different set of nutritional priorities. And only then, figuring out what your end goal is, should you start figuring out what kind of nutrition plan would work best for you. But before getting into that, has anyone heard of a DEXA scan before? So a DEXA scan is by far the most accurate way to understand your body's composition. So how much body fat you're carrying, your lean body mass, how much muscle mass, your bone density, and understanding how much visceral fat you're carrying as well. So I'll break each of these down and why they're important. Does anyone understand the concept of sarcopenia? So sarcopenia is what happens when we age. We lose around 10% muscle every year or so after a certain age. We lose muscle over time. And muscle is very important for keeping our insulin in check, for making sure that we can work independently and be mobile. But it's something that gets lost over time if we don't use it or work to actively maintain and build it. So doing something like a DEXA scan will allow you to see what that looks like in practice for your body. Visceral fat. Does anyone know what visceral fat is? Or heard of it? Heard of it. So there's broadly two different types of fat. We've got subcutaneous fat, so that's the fat that you can pinch and hold. And then you got visceral fat. So visceral fat is the fat you can't see. It's the fat that wraps around your organs, your pancreas, your liver, your kidneys, and it causes inflammation and a whole host of cardiometabolic issues thereafter. I could present you two individuals who look pretty much the same, and they might not even look too heavy either. They could look broadly slim as well. But if you take them both for a DEXA scan, one person would show that they have high amounts of visceral fat binding across the organs, and another person won't have that being shown. So again, that's just to highlight the fact that this is the fat you can't see. But again, causes a whole host of metabolic issues. And by doing something like a DEXA scan, which is it's a non-invasive scan, it takes around less than 10 minutes, can give you by far the most accurate representation of where you are in terms of body composition. It's not just about the weight you're carrying. The scales don't only tell you so much. It's like what's happening underneath and in between. What this also allows you to do is understand your basal metabolic rate. So I'll explain that. It's a very simple term. It just means how many calories is my body burning just to keep me alive? If I did nothing all day, how many calories is my body burning? That would be your basal metabolic rate. By figuring that out, we can figure out how many calories you need per day to survive. And from there, we can work out how should we break down the food so it best serves your body composition goals and stop overnutrition. And even here, like we can see things like cardiovascular risk when it comes to how much visceral fat an individual has. This individual here has very minimal fat. He actually sits at 10%. So that would be classed for a male, healthy individual when you sit at 12 to 15%. So a few things. Consistent meal times is very key. Has anyone gone through a period where stress hits and you end up eating for convenience? Yeah? And you end up picking up anything, and then next thing you know, you're not eating the best things for you? Well, ideally, having those consistent meal times and consistent meals will help support that. Avoiding skipping meals as well. I'm sure everyone's been guilty of that at some point. So I've actually worked with someone with Lloyds Bank previously, and one of the things that happened with is anyone pretty much sick of it at this point as well? I'm sure. But again, we know that protein is it's needed. It's absolutely necessary for us to have a functioning body. How much of it is the question? How much do we need to eat? And that can be overstated as well sometimes, but by other people can be understated. I'll give you a very clear rubric on this. We want to look at 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. So that's not the same as your current body weight. I just want to get that very clear. Your protein demands is not about how much you weigh, but how much lean body mass you hold. So let's say, for example, you don't sit as a man at 12 to 15 body fat percentage, and as a woman, you don't sit around the 20% mark. You'd want to figure out what your ideal body weight would be, and then calculate the calories you need. And thereby, you figure out how much protein you need as well. So let's say you, as a man, you weigh 90 kg, and your ideal would be 80 kg. That's your healthy weight. You'd figure out, based on 80 kg, how many grams of protein I need at 1.2 grams. And that's about just nearly 100 grams of protein a day. And you could split that across 3 meals, right? So you want to evenly distribute that across the day. And when it comes to training, adjusting your macronutrients based on your day's training. So I'd say beyond training, but also your work schedule as well. Has anyone here had a heavy lunch and then felt extremely sleepy and tired after? Everyone can relate to that. Being in the office, you'll have meetings 1, 2 p.m. and you'll need your brain to function at 100%. When you have a heavy carb meal, and not to say demonizing carbs, that carbs are bad, but you have a heavy carb meal, your body's too busy digesting that. Your blood sugar rises, you start to have brain fog, and next thing you know, your body's in a bit of a state to fall asleep. Ideally, at those points, you craft your meals around your day. You want to go higher in protein and probably less in carbs. Let's say you had training. If you want to go to gym straight up, get gym straight after your meal, ideally you would want to up the carbs a bit so you have some energy to burn during the training session. So I want to walk you through something that we did with one of our clients. As you can see here, this is a meal plan we created together. And bear in mind, this person was Indian descent, he was vegetarian. So there's definitely some back and forth on what he could eat and what would be most appropriate for him. At the time, when we first met and I assessed him, he was only eating 30 grams of protein a day, which was severely under eating. And that affected his body composition, affected his energy, and muscle loss as well. So things like having Greek yogurt in the morning. Greek yogurt is by far one of the best protein sources if you're vegetarian, but in general. It has about 10 grams of protein per 100 grams of Greek yogurt if it's 0%. Things like rolled oats, chia seeds, and blueberries. Chia seeds, really great for fiber. So when you look at health, we're looking at gut health as well. So if you can see here, we've incorporated things to help facilitate that. Cinnamon, anti-inflammatory. So this is a very basic breakfast that takes less than 2 minutes to make. So, and that's something you can reliably have every day. Boiled eggs, if you eat eggs, they're basically a vitamin bomb. They have many minerals and vitamins in them. Things like choline, which is essential for brain health. For lunch, we had a bit of variety. Some days we have things like cottage cheese. Some days we'd have paneer. Some days we'd have tofu. It was a big mix of all of that. But the key here is you want to have a protein anchor. Make sure you have a protein supplement, which is like, it could be chicken, it could be lamb, it could be fish, it could be tofu or paneer, right? These are all protein sources. If you can get around 20 to 30 grams of protein in that meal, you can start building the rest of the meal out of it. Then you can figure out how many carbs and fats you need. But the idea is you want to have a protein anchor. What would that look like in practice? And this is a little hack I give to people who don't want to spend time calculating. Obviously, if you want the optimal results, you would need to calculate for a bit. But it's called the plate rule. So you want to have a fistful of carbs on your plate. So that could be rice or potatoes. You want to have around a fistful or palmful of protein. And then the rest of the plate would be vegetables or salad, about half of it. And if you concoct your plates that way, and I'll be very honest with you, it's actually helped some individuals help with rapid fat loss because they were eating in such a way that was completely opposite to that. Simple changes like that, if you're probably at the heavier end, can bring you way down in a matter of weeks. So that's something you can take away and be quite tangible. If you can see here, we've included things like kefir. Everyone's heard of kefir? So kefir is a yogurt drink. It's really good for gut health, improving microbiome. Having as much as protein is important. We want to have different elements of fiber and gut health. So introducing fiber and making sure it's a big part of your diet is also key to help digestion. And yeah, for this individual, he used to go to gym after work, so the carbs are pretty much placed towards the latter end of the day to support with fueling. But at the end, you can see that the protein he hit was around 130 grams, which is obviously on the higher end because his goal was for body recomposition, which was to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. But it's more than 100 grams more than he was eating before. So there's your answer.
Does it matter how it's been cooked? Like take paneer or tofu for an example. You fry it.
Yeah.
So is that bad as opposed to?
I want to stay away from saying bad or good when it comes to anything, but it's not ideal. So when you fry something, yeah, you know what you're doing. You're frying in oil. Oil is, even a tablespoon of oil is 100 calories. So you can imagine like a bowl of fruit, a big bowl of fruit could be 100 calories. That 1 tablespoon of oil is 100 calories. And by frying it, you also, the nutrition aspect's kind of gone. By frying your vegetables, frying your paneer, baking them, cooking them, but also using a bit less oil can work. That's what we did with the person we worked with. He used a teaspoon of oil in making his food. And another thing I'd say that would really support your journey is sharing it with your partner, your spouse. By working with your wife, your husband, or whoever, they're also inclined on your journey too, and you end up cooking together, and then you're following the same goals. So his wife, funnily enough, was like, who's this Harsha guy who's making you eat protein all the time? It's like, fine. And they end up going shopping together and buying the kind of foods they needed to support their health and body composition. And it changed their eating habits over time. And bear in mind, these guys were big foodies. At first, there's a lot of resistance to the meal plan, but then after incorporating different varieties and explaining how you can eat pretty much what you want, but having these metrics and in place of having enough protein and limiting your fat a bit, you can create really inventive meals that also satisfy the taste buds. When it comes to training and working out, let me know what best resonates with you on this. I'll give you a sec to read through A. Anyone on B? Okay. Anyone on C? Okay. So when it comes to long-term health, I'm sure everyone's very much aware that as you get older, the two things that are probably most important that will allow for not just feeling good, but your independence as well, is strength training, resistance training, and supporting your cardiovascular health. So let's break that down. Starting with training, people can exercise sporadically. That's not the same as training. Going for a few workouts or putting a sweat on, it's good. I'm not negating that, but it's not the same as working towards a goal. Like with anything, you need to have an end in mind. So let's say, for example, I want to get stronger. I want to be able to lift things. I want to be able to lift my furniture and not have my back out. I'll give you the case of the person I worked with recently. His shoulder was out some time back. So he had difficulties in his left arm. He had a disc burst in his neck, which affected his nerve endings. He hadn't gone to the gym since. Doesn't work out. And in doing so, it's kind of a self-fulfilling cycle. So when it came to lifting anything, doing gardening, he would just be in pain. So the goal for him was, how do we rebuild strength in that arm? And how do we overall get him to be able to lift and have some independence and do things around the house again? So we incorporate strength training. And I think there's a misconception that you need to go to gym 5-7 days a week to get strong and to be fit. That's absolutely not necessary unless you're a Team GB athlete. If you're an individual who just wants to support and better their health, something as low as 2 times a week can work in your favor. Some training is better than none, of course, but having a routine of at least maybe three days a week is something I believe most people can manage to some degree. And it doesn't even require you to be in the gym for an hour. Even half an hour to 45 minutes of dedicated strength training, which only needs to be maybe 3 to 5 exercises, but with intention that you're there to get stronger, is absolutely life-changing. It's small things that compound over time, right? So one thing I'll be looking at is, am I getting stronger over time? That's a very reliable metric of, am I doing the training right? Are these movements feeling smoother? Next thing you know, the things that you'd find difficult, like lifting bags or juggling different things across the, your house and the workplace, become much more easier. So that's one thing I'd focus on, building muscle by doing resistance training. Like I said, it's depending on your goal. Do you want to recomp your body? Do you want to lose fat and build muscle? Do you want to build strength? Do you want to improve your cardiovascular fitness? So I spoke about cardiovascular fitness. This is not me saying you should sign up to the London Marathon. I don't know why there's been a trend in the last 2 years where everyone's signing up to a marathon. I'm great. I'm happy with the health trend, but it doesn't necessarily require you to go to the extremes. I think the first thing that we should all be doing is building a cardiovascular base, an aerobic base. And what that means is it's essentially working at a zone 2 level. Does anyone know what zone 2 means in terms of the zones of cardio? Zone 2, if I were to say it in words, it's talking, not singing. So if you can run or jog or walk at a high pace where you can still hold conversation and obviously not be able to do anything more than that, that's a good base to work with, right? Because that allows you to work on your lung, your heart capacity, and how your body deals with oxygen. And that's key. And VO2 max, has anyone come across that phrase? So VO2 max is your body's threshold, upper threshold, and how it uses oxygen. And it's probably one of the most important markers that correlates with longevity and living a healthy, long life. And it doesn't require running marathons or, really, pushing yourself into the extremes. But starting with a cardio, an aerobic base of just walking, jogging, 2-3 sessions a week, even 2 sessions a week, is absolutely key. And if you're not doing any right now, by starting this, you will see an absolute difference in going up the stairs, walking long distances, not being out of breath. And these are typically the first things we see clients stop doing. Noticeably knowing that they can walk up many stairs and not feel out of breath, or playing with their children and not holding onto their chest after. So something to keep in mind. When it comes to programs, you want to keep it balanced. You want to have a mix of resistance training, cardio, and mobility work. I want to emphasize and highlight mobility work. Everyone here I know has been sitting at a desk for 7 to 8 hours a day, to the point where your shoulders have probably rounded forward and your neck has craned forward as well. This can be undone. So that's one thing I want to expand on now. Mobility work, you can find a plethora of YouTube videos online that are 10, 15 minutes of mobility for your hips, for your shoulders, for your back, for your legs. And that helps undo all the sitting that you do every day. Another thing that you could walk towards is doing a dead hang. Does anyone know what a dead hang is? It's essentially hanging off a bar. I know you can work your way towards this, but hanging on a bar, and that helps decompress your shoulders after being at your desk all day. It's even shown over time, being rounded at your desk has actually affected the way people's shoulders look over time, and that it actually physically moves forward. These things can be easily undone, but again, it's being mindful and working towards it. Baby steps. So this is the example plan that we worked through with one of our clients. His was a mix of wanting to be able to run more, run a 5K, but also strength train as well. So as you can see here, we gave him a plan that was actually very simple, a few sets across different strength exercises. And if I want to break this down to you, make it more tangible, there's a few movements I would prioritize. Push movements, right? Pull movements, hinge movements where you're bending up and down, and a few squat movements. So squatting down. Those are your bread and butter. They don't have to be the same exercise. I'm not asking anyone to get a barbell bench press and start pressing 100 kgs. No, it's, are you working on these movements? Because these movements will save you over time. They will keep you healthy and young over time as well. It will also ensure your independence. So if you can work across push, pull, a hinge, a squat, that will pretty much be your bread and butter for the rest of your life to keep young and healthy. And just moving on. Optimizing recovery. So I know it might have seemed like I'm telling everyone to, really push themselves, but in doing so, I want you to also focus on recovery. That's a really key part of health overall. So whilst it's about building strength and building that cardio, respiratory, aspect, it's also about how do you ensure that you're de-stressed? How do we ensure that you're optimally rested after working out? Because pushing, it leads to injuries without having that, having that rest and having that recovery after. The best plan is the one that you can stick to. That's what it is. It's not the plan that I prescribe or anyone prescribes or the latest trend prescribes. It's the one that you can do consistently over time. So finally, I want to get into medical testing. And I think this is the part I'm very passionate about, and I have a lot to say about, but I'll try not to chew anyone's ear off on this aspect. So when it comes to medical testing, can anyone relate to this slide here or resonate or done any of these testings before? Look at the next one. See? Okay. So when it comes to health tests, let's start with a blood test, for example. A lot of people treat it like a pass-fail. Like, you go to the doctors, you get the blood test done, and then what do you hear inevitably? Normal. These are normal. These aren't too good. But there's not much breakdown after that. Normal doesn't mean good. Okay, I just want to get that very clear. For one example, one of our clients had a blood test, a HbA1c test. A HbA1c blood test monitors how much sugar that's been in your system, average over 3 months. Now, I believe the threshold was around 41 and above, was considered 41 to 47, I think, was pre-diabetes. He was at 38. On the report, very honestly, this is with the private health insurer, mind you. On the blood test report, it said normal. 38 is 2 millimoles away from 40, and that would have put him into pre-diabetes. So just to clarify, normal isn't the same as good. What you do ideally is look at the trajectory of where you're going by looking at your different lifestyle factors, looking at how your lifestyle is, and looking at how your blood tests change over time will tell you where you're going. The current healthcare system, it's designed to treat people at a population level, right? At a population, which is different because the thresholds are made for a wide group of people, for a large population. And it makes sense if you need to have standards and consistency of when to start treating people with interventions. But it's not the same for an individual. It's easier to say this person has met the threshold, they've crossed the statistical line, and therefore we need to meet that with medical intervention and diagnosis. For the individual, it could mean that you're close and on the way to a comorbidity or negative health outcomes, but we don't intervene. By being proactive around things like blood testing and so on and so forth, you will have a much more clearer picture of where you're at and which way you're going to. And that's something I emphasize a lot. I'm not asking about whether you had a normal blood test or anything came as good or bad, but what do the markers say? Where are we trending? What are we not testing? What are the results not saying? I think the key thing here is I want everyone here to have ownership over their health, because it is your body in the day. It's you that has to deal with it. So the more you become verbally fluent with what these things mean to you, or mean for you specifically when it comes to knowing what your blood sugar HbA1c reading is, or knowing what your thyroid reading is, or knowing what your lipid profiles are saying, only then will you have some ownership and onus of where your health is going and what to do about it and how to intervene in the best way possible. If I were to give you, yes?
What's mold?
So mold is a good question. So mold testing is literally if you have mold in your house. So that can affect a plethora of negative health outcomes that even now can't be best articulated because people are dealing with mold related illnesses and aren't able to find the right answers and able to deal with what exactly is happening. It can affect your autoimmune. It can affect many things within an individual. Most recently, I'm not sure if anyone has heard of Chris Williamson. So he hosts a podcast called Modern Wisdom. He's really well known, well famous guy. And he seems to be like the apex of health. Like he's in great shape. He's doing these runs and he's known as a fitness guy. But only recently he put out a half an hour, 45-minute video explaining that his health has been shockingly poor and that he's been going to hospitals to find out for different treatments, to find out exactly what's going wrong with him, suffering with extreme brain fog, suffering with pain, gut issues. And then they found out that his house was pretty much abundant and saturated in mold, which required him to do a thorough clean out and move out for a few days. And it affects many individuals. So it stemmed from not knowing what resulted in his current health issues. And so after doing that mold test, they figured out mold was the primary cause. When it comes to doing this practically for yourself, I know I've just gone around about blood panels and population level testing, but starting off with a comprehensive blood test, understanding your nutrient deficiencies, because that's different for every individual. I mean, I know a lot of people buy supplements thinking this is going to fix everything, but unless you know what you're deficient in, you're just buying expensive supplements. Understanding inflammation and metabolic health. So that will all come from a comprehensive blood test. A DEXA scan, incredibly important to assess your body composition, so you have a good baseline of where you're at least it keeps you honest with yourself. Understand your bone density, because like I mentioned before, sarcopenia is the loss of muscle over time. Osteoporosis is the loss of bone density. And again, the way to combat both of these is to do some form of resistance training over time. Hormone profile. So this is exceptionally important for men and women. For men, looking at things like testosterone and current lifestyle factors, the way you live your life can absolutely have tremendous effects on your testosterone production. And testosterone is the basis of men's health. Your energy, your attitude, your virility, your liveliness is all determined by that. Cortisol, showing how stressed and inflamed your body is. And for women, looking at things like thyroid function, which has an abundant many negative health effects when not monitored properly. And these are obviously additional tests one can carry on if you want to go an extra level deep. These are advanced testing. But the first three, I would absolutely recommend for any individual. Unfortunately, many people start doing tests when things are very obvious. We should reverse that thinking and start doing things when we feel like they're moving in the wrong direction, so we get a bit better understanding. So there are many clinics that offer these tests, potentially going through private health insurance as well. I believe if you've got a company plan, they do a health assessment. And at least from a health assessment, you'd at least be able to get a HbA1c glucose test done. And that will give you a good understanding if where you are, if you're walking towards insulin resistance and pre-diabetes. And schedule tests during a period of stability. That's another key thing here. If you're currently very stressed out, if you're going through a very rough period, getting a blood test done then will probably give you the worst results then. Probably might not be the most accurate and representative. So do it in a calm period of your life. And then again, book time for your testing, ensuring that and ensuring you fast for your blood work or whatever's required of the tester. So I would absolutely start here. If that's something you're very concerned about, because at least then you have a baseline to go off and understand where your health is moving in what direction, and then using those other interventions I called out earlier. So if anyone's interested in moving at a much more personalized aspect of looking at health, this is one thing I've done for myself recently, and we've partnered with MyFitnessGenes. They're a DNA sequencing company. Genetics can actually profoundly affect how your body reacts to stress, what kind of diets work best for your body, whether you work well when it comes to caffeine or you metabolize it slowly, whether you need more recovery, what vitamins you might be deficient in, what your proclivity towards inflammation and heart disease. Doing a DNA test can actually tell you so much, because after spending maybe thousands of pounds on tests and different diets and routines, you know exactly how your body functions and what needs to be done for you. So these are results from mine, actually. So I'm just to give you a quick overview of what that looks like. When I did my test done, I was able to see what my DNA signature says about when it comes to my nutrition and my exercise and training. Specifically, and I've zoomed in on vitamin requirements. So when it comes to vitamin A specifically, apparently I have an increased need for it compared to the average individual. And that's something I need to work on myself in order to get the right amount, quantity of vitamin A in. Same with vitamin D, as it says, C, high priority. And then it goes into a bit more detail around the requirement and the kind of insights and actions I need to do, therefore, in order to mitigate that. And I suggest this to anyone who's been playing a lot of guesswork. Our DNA and genetics absolutely have a profound effect on how lifestyle looks like for us and how health and fitness looks for us. So I don't want to understate the importance of understanding it from an individual basis. So yeah, in terms of going forward with that, partner with a professional, with a health professional that can help you interpret your test results. When you go for a blood test, they will have staff there that will help you. They'll explain what those markers mean. It's not about getting more data. I think we're all surrounded by data on day to day, but what do I do with that data? What does it mean for me? And using that data to create a personalized strategy for yourself, whether that looks like a new kind of diet plan that works towards your goals, understanding what deficiencies you have for your blood test, and how you might modify your sleep and training on the basis of that. And this is not a one-time thing. Health is something that you have for life. Testing every 3 to 6 months or yearly, I'd absolutely encourage that, because the last thing you want is something to jump out at you at the end, and only then you realize, I have to do something. You want to be as proactive about this as you do with your car. Everyone services their car for MOT. Maybe because it's a legal requirement, that's why we all do it, but I think this should be as big a legal requirement as anything to service yourself and understanding what that looks like. When I talked about the medical testing and blood testing you can do, just because, like I said, it says fine doesn't mean it's always fine. It's like if a company's not legally bankrupt, that doesn't necessarily mean the company's all okay. You could have high staff turnover and the profits might be plummeting, and that tells you a more accurate picture of where that company's going. So I wouldn't take okay or normal as a good enough conclusion to one's health. And I just want to highlight this point around wearables. I'm not by any means telling everyone that they need to have a wearable on all the time, but to understand your baseline. So you know yourself, this is how I recover, this is how I sleep, and this is where I'm at currently, can probably be the biggest bang for your buck more than anything else. I use a Whoop. You can get a 1-month free trial. So there really is an excuse if you really want to do it. And then from there, understand what you might need to do after to better improve your sleep and other metrics. So overall, I just want to say, it's with all these things we covered around sleep, around nutrition, around training, around medical testing, it's not about trying to track everything and calculating everything all at once. You have a plethora of data, but what does that data mean for you and what matters most for you? So out of everything discussed today, I want you just to take away one thing. What are you currently guessing on? What could you measure? And what one practical thing do you think you can start doing from today to help better your health overall? And that's where proactive health begins.